persona de la comisión pues tienen restricciones para el desplazamiento, pero nos ha preparado una presentación que yo creo que es magnífica. Está en inglés, pero con subtítulos en español, para que todos la puedan comprender, y nos va a hablar de cuál es la situación de la modificación de la normativa europea. Y bueno, sin más, él hubiese querido venir, pero las circunstancias pues no lo permiten.
Good day, greetings from Brussels. This is a recorded message, unfortunately. I say unfortunately, not because it gives a lot of distance between you and me. Let me introduce myself. My name is Jaco Huisman. I am the relatively new policy officer for the ELV directive. And with this presentation, I would like to give you an update on where we are in the revision process, which is probably very important for you as recyclers and others involved in this business. Let me highlight a little bit where this file is coming from. As you know, there's a lot of commitments under the European Green Deal. There's the Circular Economy Action Plan that includes very specific mentioning of end-of-life vehicles as an imported source of raw materials, and also improve the circularity and reduced all of the, let's say, potential negative effects of the waste generation stages. And what this policies are doing is to focus on improving the design of products, to enhance quality of recycling, and to look at the uptake of recycled materials in new products. And among with 6 other sectors, vehicles are listed as one of the key priorities in this Circular Economy Action Plan. Now, the type approval legislation related to, let's say, recycling, recovery, and reuse is a separate directive, but in the mandate given to us, we are clearly looking at a potential merger of the type approval and the ELV directive, with the objective to come with a much more complete circularity package here. But of course, there's a lot of other linkages related to reducing pollution, the chemical strategies, plastics, the registration of vehicles, which is also related to various other domains, the EPR requirements under the Waste Framework Directive, etc., etc. Some facts and figures for you from the evaluation report that was delivered by the end of 2021. We're talking about a sizable vehicle fleet of over 300 million passenger cars, with about 11 million vehicles leaving the fleet. The average weight of these vehicles is still creeping up. We are talking about well over 1,000 kilograms each. And also the average age is quite significant, and that makes it, of course, very difficult to align design-related provisions with end-of-life related measures at the end of a vehicle life cycle. Another key element is the unknown whereabouts. Roughly 1/3 or maybe even up to 40% of the vehicles are not reported and properly monitored. Well, why do we need to change the EU rules on ELVs? Why are we not just letting the situation as it is? There are some achievements identified in the evaluation report indeed, but there are some weaknesses identified. The scope of the directive leaves out about 45 million vehicles, and many of them, the trucks, motorcycles, buses, and trailers, some of those have a significant weight. The directive has not really led to better eco-design, and the use of recycled materials is very limited. A large number of vehicles is missing, this 35% or maybe even higher. So therefore, key objectives of the review are to improve the circularity in the design, material sourcing, supply, production, and end-of-life treatment, to improve the traceability of vehicles out of sight at the moment, to perhaps regulate or restrict the export of used cars which are not roadworthy or too old or having or too high pollution levels, and as said before, to investigate an extension of the scope of the ELV directive to the other type approval categories. Looking at different measures, potential measures, I should say here, to improve the the design to possibly modernize the 3R type approval approach, to look at measures to improve reuse and reuse conditions, remanufacturing and recycling of parts, and to strengthen and improve, beef up the role of extended producer responsibility. And looking at various ways to prevent, to promote improved dismantling and reuse, recycling of parts and components, to look at the collection and the collection system, to improve also in this digital age that we didn't really have 20 years ago, the information available on vehicles, and to look at the 3R reuse recycling rates here for components and materials from ELVs. So for circularity, we are, when it comes to the design part, we look at the better verification, to look at what are cost-effective measures to improve design and production, or when it comes to material selection, the incompatibilities that sometimes are there in how things are connected to each other or glued, for instance. And in particular, also attention to minimum targets for the recycled content of plastics in future vehicles. So possible measures to increase reuse are related to various ways to stimulate the removal of parts and components, either mandatory or in other ways. That doesn't mean everything has to be done by hand, but at least a good separation before everything goes through shredder can make sense for certain materials. We're looking at more transparency from the car manufacturers on, for instance, the location of hazardous substances and parts and components that require specific attention. We're also looking at support mechanisms to improve the market for used and remanufactured spare parts. And we are considering various material-specific targets, for instance, for glass, plastics, metals, CRMs, and the role of EPR is under investigation. We are looking at the entire spectrum of possibilities here, ranging from relatively simple information requirements, training, towards, let's say, full, let's say, cost compensations, for instance, for the compliance and depollution efforts at recyclers. From that angle, all of the measures are on the table, and we're carefully looking at the effectiveness, the cost, and the proportionality of various EPR incentives. The traceability of vehicles is another point. We have to address this problem of not knowing where a lot of the vehicles are. So there are various reasons. We are both looking at the intra-EU and the export dimension in this, much further ranging measures like a much more improved vehicle registration systems in the EU. So possible ways are here can go for improving indeed the reporting element, to look at the conditions and registration conditions, cancellations of registrations, and also to seek ways to limit the amount of illegal dismantlers and operators in the automotive supply chain. The third objective is to look also at the extension of the scope of the ELV directive. And here, as you know, the other type approval categories, the number of vehicles is relatively not as much as the passenger cars and vans. But of course, in the case of buses and trucks, we have a significant weight, and we still want to see much more proof that these types of vehicles are also treated in a responsible and in a sustainable manner. So possible options on the table here are ranging from, again, relatively basic information requirements up until maybe expanding the full type approval scope to the other type approval categories as well. Now I'm nearing the end. I think the million-dollar question probably is, when are you going to deliver? Well, let me say a few words on this. This is the longer-term timeline. At the moment, the contractors are finishing the impact assessment. We hope to have that finalized in the end of June, early July now. We will start drafting our staff working document and the legal proposal very soon. And we are hoping to have a package available for adoption in the first quarter of next year. And so we are going to do our best to deliver a very good and balanced package by the first quarter of next year. And with that, I would like to say thank you for your attention, and I hope at some point in time we can also meet in person in a much warmer and nicer environment, hopefully in Spain in the next years, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.
Bueno, la verdad que, señor Huisman, ha sido un encanto todo el tiempo que hemos estado en contacto con él. Nos ha preparado esta magnífica presentación que yo creo que explica muy bien cuáles son los próximos pasos que se esperan con el nuevo reglamento. Habéis visto pues muchas novedades. Yo, aunque no está aquí, le quiero agradecer todo ese esfuerzo que ha hecho de preparar esta ponencia. Sabemos que está además pues muy liado con el tema del nuevo texto. Y nada, yo quería agradecerle desde aquí esa generosidad de haber preparado la presentación.